In this video, I'm going to show you how to adjust a mechanical rear derailleur on a bicycle, either a mountain bike, road bike, or cyclocross bike. The only thing that you're going to need to do this service is a small flat blade or Phillips head screwdriver. The first step in adjusting a rear derailleur is to make sure your limit screws are where they need to be. Now, I'm going to do this without the chain on, which makes this job easier. You can do it with the chain on, but I'm going to show you without it because it's a little bit easier to show you, and again, it is easier to do. Now, before you adjust your rear derailleur, just make sure your rear wheel is straight in your bicycle. This uses a through axle, so it's threaded tight all the way. But especially if you use a quick release, put the bike on the ground, loosen the quick release, push down on the saddle, tighten it just to make sure everything is straight. So you have two limit screws. On this one, the top one is the high limit screw, in other words, for the biggest gear or the smallest cog. So usually it'll say an H and an L. It's really hard to see. So you may just need to kind of turn this as I show you and see which one is which. You can also tell, like, this one is all the way down to the smallest cog, but you can see where the limit screw hits the derailleur. So I know that this screw is for the high adjustment, again, the smallest cog, because I can see when I turn this, it's going to push on the rear derailleur. The other screw is not touching any part of the derailleur. And if I shifted it all the way over to the big ring, you could look inside and see where this screw, the low screw, touches the derailleur. So that's one way that you can figure out which screw is which. When I was editing this video, I realized that I need to mention a tip, so I'm inserting this clip here. And that is, whether you're doing this with the chain on or off, when you're adjusting this high screw, in other words, the one for the smallest cog, you need to make sure there is absolutely no tension on this cable. And you can do that by turning your barrel adjuster so there's no tension, or you can take an Allen wrench and loosen this screw here and just totally remove the cable. That way you guarantee that high limit screw, the one for the smallest cog, can be set properly, because if there's too much tension on this cable initially, it won't even allow the derailleur to drop down so you can set that limit screw. And along those same lines, when I'm showing you how to do the limit screw for the largest cog, you want to actually take your hand and push the derailleur over instead of only relying on the tension of the cable, because if the tension on the cable is not enough, then you're not pushing that screw over. Now, if you're doing this with no chain and no cable, you have to do it with your hands. So you have to actually push the derailleur. But even if you have the cable in here, take your hand and just push the derailleur over and make sure it is going far enough when you're trying to set this limit screw for the largest cog. Tightening each of these screws is going to move the derailleur inward. So by tightening this screw, it's going to shift the rear derailleur inward. Now, what you want to do is you want to make sure it's lined up. Okay, this one is perfectly lined up with the small cog, and this is why it's easier to do with the chain off, but again, you can do it with the chain on if you don't want to take it off, if you're not changing out your chain. So in this instance, again, this is lined up perfectly. If it wasn't, I would turn this screw and it would adjust the rear derailleur inward. So again, tightening it is going to move the derailleur that way. And obviously, if it's too far in and you want to align it back out, you're going to loosen that screw, and that'll let the derailleur kind of move to the outside. Now, just as a tip, because the derailleur is putting pressure on the screw, it's sometimes hard to turn that screw. So if you wanted to make an adjustment, you could push the derailleur in, relieve the tension off the screw, and then it's easier to turn. You could turn it in, let it back out, kind of see if it's lined up, and then do it again. Because these are some pretty small screws, and you don't want to strip these screws. So again, relieving pressure by pushing it inward will allow that screw to turn easier. What you could also do is you could actually shift your derailleur, and you can't see it, but I'm reaching up here and shifting. That's going to take the pressure off the screw as well, but for me, it's just easier to just push it in with your hand. All right, so now that I know my limit screw is set, I'm going to check the other limit screw, and I have a derailleur cable in here. Some of you guys may be doing this without the derailleur cable. Now I've shifted it all the way out to the big chain ring, and I'm going to look at the alignment. And actually this one could probably go out a little bit. So I'm going to relieve some tension off this screw. And now for this one I would have to shift to get the pressure off the screw. So I'm going to take some pressure off the screw, turn my low limit screw out a little bit, and go back and see if it's lined up. So sorry about the camera angle there, but now you can see that it's kind of hard to tell with the camera angle here, but I'm eyeballing it. It looks like it's lined up pretty well. Now you can fine tune these screws after you've got your chain on when you pedal the bicycle, and this is easier to do in a stand, by the way, but you could actually flip the bike upside down or just kind of elevate the bike a little bit to do this. With the chain on, let me show you what I mean by fine-tuning the limit screws. And this is something that you can do even after you eyeball it with the chain off, if that's the way you're doing it, or if you're just doing the limit screw sets with the chain on. This is what I'd recommend doing. So let's look at the limit screw for the smallest cog. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to turn it in a little bit. And so I want to get it to where it just barely won't drop into the small cog, and then I'm going to back it out. That way you guarantee that the limit screw is not set so the chain drops too far. If it's too far, the chain can drop off the cog and get jammed between the cog and the frame. Now up at the upper end is even more important, because if you ever drop a chain into the spokes, it can be disastrous. It can break your derailleur, and that would end your ride and you would be walking. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just drop it down in one gear below, and I'm going to take the limit screw, which on this Shimano XT derailleur, the one for the largest cog is the lower screw. So I'm going to tighten the screw a little bit, and I'm going to get it to where it just barely won't go up into the big cog, and I'm going to have to tighten a little bit more. Okay, it just, you can see it's kind of skipping off and not going up there. So now I'm just going to back out the screw a little bit, so you're turning it counterclockwise, just to give it a little bit of adjustment, because you want it to be where it will just go up into that big cog and stay there without making a grinding noise like it's trying to jump down. So now I know that I've got my lower limit screw adjusted well, and also my upper limit screw. And again, you'll usually have an H on here for the one that's down in the small cog or biggest gear, and then an L will mark the screw for the biggest cog, which is the one we're in now. Now that I've got my limit screw set, it's time to adjust the tension of the cable. And let me just tell you how rear derailleurs work. As the tension on the cable is released, the rear derailleur is going to go towards the small cog, in other words, a bigger gear. As you tighten the cable, it's going to move the derailleur out towards the big cog. The only time that's different is back in the, I think, like late 90s or early 90s or something like that, Shimano had the rapid rise derailleurs, which are opposite. But most rear derailleurs, when the tension is released off the cable, it will go towards the biggest gear. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to turn the barrel adjuster either at the derailleur itself or up by the shifter. Now the first thing that you want to do is turn your barrel adjusters all the way in and then back them out one turn. So when I say in, you're turning it clockwise. In other words, so you're threading it. This is a normal thread pattern. So as you turn it clockwise, it's going to go inward. And so we want to turn this all the way in and then back it out about a turn. And if you had a barrel adjuster down by the rear derailleur, you would want to do the same thing. Turn it all the way in and then back it out one turn. Then what you're going to want to do is if this were a new cable or something like that, you want to loosen your screw here and pull the cable so you have as much tension as you can get it by hand, and then we'll do the rest with the barrel adjusters. So what you want to do is shift like you're going to the biggest gear. In other words, you're taking all the tension off the cable. So whether it's a road bike or a mountain bike, shift so it's in your smallest cog or biggest gear. When I say biggest gear, the hardest to pedal in the back. And while you're doing that, make sure you turn the pedals to allow the chain and derailleur to move all the way to that smallest cog. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn the pedals and we're going to shift up one gear. So I'm pushing the shifter so it shifts up one gear. Now this one shifted pretty good. If it hesitates, what you're going to want to do is put tension on this cable by backing out your barrel adjuster, either down at the rear derailleur or up at the shifter. This bike only has it up at the shifter. So let me turn this barrel adjuster all the way in so you can see what it would look like if it hesitates. And this one is actually adjusted pretty good. So it's hesitating. So what I need to do is I need to back out this barrel adjuster. Okay. Now I'm turning the pedals and I'm shifting. Okay, this shifted up pretty good, and I released it and went back down. If the rear derailleur hesitates going towards a bigger cog, you need to put a little bit more tension on the cable by backing out the barrel adjuster. If the derailleur hesitates by going to a smaller gear, or smaller cog, then you want to loosen the cable. So I'm going to put some tension on the barrel. I'm going to back out the barrel adjuster pretty good, and we'll watch it hesitate. So I'm going to shift up right here, and you'll see I've only it's in the smallest cog, and I'm going to shift up one, and it actually went up two. So the cable is too tight. It's allowing it to go up too much. So I'm going to shift down, and you'll see it goes to the smallest cog. So now what I want to do is I need to release some tension on that barrel adjuster. Okay, it shifts up quick and it shifts down quick, and that you can try that with a few gears. So again, that hesitated a little bit. So I'm going to back off a little bit more tension because it's too tight. And I just keep going through the gears and make sure it doesn't hesitate. So this is shifting really good. And actually I need a little bit more tension right there because it didn't jump up quick enough. It should jump up and jump down quickly, and if it doesn't, you need to make your adjustments. So just to recap, if you're shifting and the chain hesitates going down to a smaller cog or bigger gear, then you need to release some tension by backing off the barrel adjuster. In other words, releasing tension by turning the barrel adjuster clockwise. If it hesitates going up, you need more tension, and you would back the barrel adjuster out, in other words, turning it counterclockwise, to put more tension on the cable. Now a tip here is, if you have it shifting really well in one side of the cog, but up in a different side, you have to make adjustments. That's a sign that your derailleur hanger could be bent. And in fact, that's the telltale sign of a bent derailleur hanger if you can't really see it. And then you may have to take your bike to the shop and have them either straighten the derailleur hanger, or if it's bent real bad, they need to go ahead and replace it. So that's going to do it for this video of adjusting a mechanical rear derailleur. Now let me give you a tip here, and this is something that can be done while you're riding as well, especially if you have a new bike or a new cable. That cable is going to stretch out and you're going to need to put some more tension on it. So what you can do is, if you're riding and your bike is hesitating shifting into a bigger cog in the back or an easier gear to pedal, then you're going to want to back that barrel adjuster out maybe half a turn. So in other words, you're turning it counterclockwise so it's coming away from the shifter, and that will put tension on the cable and make it shift into that bigger cog easier. So again, you can do that while you're riding, and that's why bike companies put those barrel adjusters up by your shifters. So if you have any questions, leave it below in the comments. Thanks for watching.